Have you ever walked out of a horror movie and just felt more annoyed than afraid? Take A Quiet Place Day 1 for an example. I loved the first movie in this series when it first came out. This series had such a strong start, but this one just lacked the tension that made the first so damn scary. And I can list off a couple horror movies that came out recently that fall into this criteria. And what's even more frustrating is that all these movies get gassed up so much on social media that they can just never live up to the hype once you go see them in theaters. But what if I told you that there's horror films out there that you haven't even heard about that are so scary it makes it hard to go to bed at night? Well, today I'm ranking 3 of these movies that I've watched and I have been terrified by. And trust me, I've watched thousands of horror movies. I do not scare easy. Obviously, there's going to be minor spoilers for these movies, but I'm not going to give away the whole thing. And don't forget to like and subscribe, or else I'm going to show up in your nightmares. Just kidding. Maybe not, though. Let's dive in with Splinter.
Don't move. Okay. Stay there. Okay. Put your hands on your head.
Look, you're not listening. There's something out there.
This film grabbed me in just from the beginning with just how cool the creature design was. And on top of that, the tension on this film is phenomenal. I think a lot of recent monster movies that we've seen come out have always struggled to really have cool creatures. I have a feeling they all just kind of look the same these days. Well, not in Splinter, because this film's creature is beyond anything I think I've ever seen in a horror movie before. Basically, it's a parasite, but it grows through wooden splinters. It makes no sense, but at the same time, it is so damn cool. You cannot touch the thing because anything it touches becomes part of it. And it keeps growing and growing over the course of the movie. And by the end, we see a really cool looking creature. I think the reason why most horror movies these days suck, it's because the monsters in them are done with VFX instead of practical effects. I don't know why, but for some reason, when you make the monsters practical, like in The Thing or in Splinter, it just looks so much better. And when it's a computer generated image, it doesn't look as good. You'd think that with CGI, monsters could look so much cooler because we can just make whatever we want on the computer. But no, for some reason, practical effects is always what ends up looking better. Like, think back to The Thing. That is one of the best body horror creature movies out there. And it's just so disturbingly terrifying. And compare that to its remake where it's all CGI, it just doesn't hit the same. And when practical effects turn out as good as they do in The Thing or Splinter, it just adds another sense of dread because you're so mesmerized with just how badass and how cool a creature can look. And speaking of badass, we gotta talk about the characters in this movie. I think what is so interesting about this movie is that the characters' personalities are so well done. It just adds a level of believability to the film, which aids in creating the tension in the conflict. We see these characters make mistakes in the movie, and they're not cheap mistakes. They are real, genuine, believable mistakes in the film that lead to more action in the film. I think a lot of horror movies these days have very dumb characters that often make very silly mistakes, and you sit there at the screen, you're like, why you do that? Why would you let the killer inside your house? Becky, what the fuck? Becky, what are you doing? Becky, he's right behind you. I think someone's in the closet. No, like, I don't know what it is in Hollywood and just putting a bunch of idiots into horror movies. But it takes away so much of the scariness because in our minds, we say to ourselves, we're not that dumb. That would never happen to me. Whether that's true or not, it gives us a lasting impression of what that film is like. But if you take characters that are smart and real and have their flaws, it makes the monster so much scarier when it outsmarts them. Because if you're in a math competition, nobody's cheering for you if you beat a 4-year-old at 2 + 2. But if you beat the smartest person in your country, yeah, people are going to notice. I think a big part of this as well comes down to acting. When characters are stupid, it makes it even worse if they're acting and the delivery on their lines is bad. Not in Splinter. The acting in this film is really good and really believable. When I first watched this movie, I had doubts because you see a really nerdy loser type guy with a really attractive, badass sort of girlfriend, which isn't a common thing. That's kind of something you would see in like a comedy movie or something, or like a superhero film. And it's kind of cheesy, but the film works with it really, really well. You see that While she is this badass girl, she's also incredibly empathetic towards her boyfriend, who kind of gets picked on by the criminal guy that shows up. But then you see these character arcs as the three of them are stuck in the gas station and have to work together. And with that, we see just the background of all their personalities, and it makes for really good world building and tension building. And on top of that, it does something that I think many horror movies try to do, but fail miserably at, and that's having comedy. When it comes to horror movies, I think comedy is a very delicate subject. If it comes out cheesy, you get into the campy area, and then your movie's kind of laughed at altogether. But if you put comedy into a horror movie, but you make it dark, black comedy, I think that's what works best. I think this blends perfectly with the tension and pacing of this film because it allows us to go from here to here to here to here, all within the span of an hour and a half. It's a whole roller coaster of different emotions, and once you get off that roller coaster, you can say, wow, that was scary, that was cool, and it made me laugh. That's like the trilogy of the best things a movie can do. So while this is only the first movie I'm mentioning on this list, I think it's generally really scary and really cool, but not as scary as the next movie we're about to talk about. And that's the lost footage of Leah Sullivan.
Hello?
God, you scared me.
Hey.
I need to come clean with you about something. I am in love with found footage horror. I'm not some artsy film bro or anything, but I think found footage is one of the most unique formats of film out there. And when it's done correctly, it adds so much believability to the scares it tries to build and set in its films. On the other hand, it can fail lots of times. And when it does fail, it fails bad and it looks like crap. But when it's good, you get some of the best horror movies out there. And the lost footage of Leah Sullivan is something I wish I saw sooner, because I put off this movie for so long because I didn't know if I liked it, and I regretted every single month I spent not watching it because it's so good. We have the main character Leah, who is making a documentary for school about a murder case in the town. But when she keeps visiting the house, things start to get a little weird. Now, I can't give away too much about this movie without spoiling it completely, but the way it paces the film and sets up the tension is just chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. The reason why the movie is so well done and the tension is so effectively built is the characters. Leah and the cop she starts to date in the film's acting performances are some of the best I've seen in a horror movie. And the reason why, when you look at the two of them on camera, you can really tell that they care about each other and love each other. And that just brings out so much more heart and soul from the film because the characters are so much more believable. And the reason why they are so comfortable with each other and so believable is because they're actually dating in real life. I think they might be married now. Someone can fact check that for me. But we're getting such a good acting performance because all of these emotions that we are seeing from these two are real, because in real life, they also exist. Obviously, this isn't possible all the time in horror movies, but for this one, it aided in the performance perfectly. Even the performances from the side characters are incredibly natural. The documentary she puts together from interviewing all these people feels very realistic. I don't know if you've ever tried to interview your mom or dad before on a camera, but usually people freeze up and start acting different once they're in front of the camera, but not with the characters in this film. This is one of the few found footage horror films that effectively uses found footage as a video format, because in the film, there are moments where we can see the bad thing that's about to happen before the characters can actually see it. Because they're recording, we can only see the reflection of things or whatnot, so they can't actually see what's in frame. And this leads to some very, very scary moments of tension where you're sitting back in your chair and you're like, run, get out of there. What are you doing? He's right behind you. But it's not done in a way that's overly cheap. It's done in a perfect way. And I don't even think this movie has any jump scares, really. The dread that it builds is just so lasting, and once the movie's over, you just think to yourself, damn, I hope my doors are locked tonight. And speaking of locking your doors, this movie will make you want to lock your entire house, and it's butterfly kisses.
Crane, and then it got a little upsetting after that.
This is yet again another found footage horror movie, but this one is unlike anything I think I've ever seen, because it combines 3 different found footage narratives into one movie. The film has 3 different storylines. The original storyline about the students trying to film Peeping Tom, Gavin, the documentary host who tries to verify and complete the students' film, and then the documentary crew's perspective of them following around Gavin. This creates such a complex meta narrative that even comments on found footage films themselves. And this allows for such a complex story, which is why I think this film is so genuinely unsettling. And I only think this film could be done correctly with found footage. I think if it's done any other way, it takes you out of it completely, because the story being told about Peeping Tom is very believable.
Possibility that this whole thing is real, and we have the possibility this whole thing is a largely plausible hoax.
It blurs the line from fiction and reality. The film goes to great lengths to make us question if what we're seeing is even true or even real, because we have an unreliable narrator. I'm not going to reveal this as a spoiler, but even the credits make you question if this is real or not. Part of what makes you believe that it's real is that the mythology behind Peeping Tom is so well built out. It sounds like it's an urban legend that's been around in a small town for 100 years, when no, the film creator just made it up. And because the mythology behind Peeping Tom is so deep, it makes it so much more rewarding that this slow burn horror film pays off at the end. It rewards us for sticking around and being curious of where this story is going to go. And the format this story is told through aids into creating this sense of suspense and dread. We're working with some really old footage and cameras here, so when things go wrong on camera, it could be easily explained away as just an old camera having a glitch or having a bug. But it breadcrumbs us just enough that in the back of our minds, we're always thinking, is this a glitch or is this real? Did they actually see Peeping Tom? And while this doesn't have a ton of jump scares in it, and the final image of this movie is genuinely so unsettling, because it makes you feel that if your eyelashes are itchy or tickling, you won't want to open them. I can't explain why, but you're just gonna have to trust me and watch the movie for yourself to find out. From a quarantined building hiding a sinister secret, to a haunted house attraction that becomes a real nightmare, to the pitch black depths beneath a busy city, these movies tap into our deepest fears. So get that popcorn and a blanket to hide under, because I'm about to talk about why these 3 found footage horror movies are really scary.
Me han mordido. Cállense. Iros. Me han mordido. Atrás, atrás, atrás.
First up, we got to talk about claustrophobia. Rec doesn't just hint at confinement, it shoves you into it head first. The entire film takes place within a cramped apartment building that's been sealed off without warning. The walls seem to close in with every passing minute. Hallways twist and turn into a labyrinth of looming shadows. It's like being stuck in an elevator with your least favorite coworker, and they farted, except the elevator is haunted and there's no emergency button and they're trying to eat you. The setting taps into a fundamental fear, the loss of escape. Knowing there's no way out magnifies every creak, every distant scream. You're not just watching the characters panic, you feel it tightening in your own chest. But why does this work so well? Because confinement strips away the illusion of safety. It forces both the characters and us to confront the terror head on, with nowhere to hide. Now let's talk about perspective, or rather, the lack of it. Rec uses the found footage style to perfection. We're confined not just by the setting, but by what we can see and hear through a single camera lens. This limited view means we're missing crucial details lurking just outside of the frame. It's like the ultimate tease. Your imagination fills the gaps, often with something far worse than what's actually there. Like, do you remember when you were a kid and you thought there was a monster under your bed? You didn't need to see it to be terrified. Rec plays on that exact fear. The unseen, the unknown. Me in your closet at 1 a.m. Just kidding, I wouldn't do that to you. You can trust me. If you don't subscribe, I might though. But add to that genius use of darkness and eventually night vision when the lights go out. Our already narrow field of vision shrinks to almost nothing. Every shadow becomes something that could potentially hold a threat. But why is this so effective? Because it mirrors our innate fear of the dark. When you can't trust your senses, paranoia sets in. And in Rec, that paranoia is fully justified. Finally, let's dive into how Rec blurs the lines between reality and the supernatural. The film starts off almost mundanely, a news crew following firefighters on a routine call. But as the events unfold, the ordinary evening turns into a twisted nightmare. This gradual shift keeps you off balance. Just when you think you have a handle on what's happening, the film throws a curveball, introducing elements that hint at something far more sinister. It's not just a physical threat, but a metaphysical one. This layering of horrors forces you to question everything you've seen. Is this a disease? A possession? Both? Neither? Government? Chickens from outer space? Killer clowns from outer space? That's actually a good movie. Well, these are all good movies, but that's a funny one. I'm going to talk about that in another video, so you should like this video and subscribe if you want to see me talk about that one. It's a good movie. And let's not even now talk about how I don't trust night vision anymore. Those green hues used to remind me of cheesy ghost hunting shows. Now, let's just say I'd rather not see what's in my closet. I'm sorry for bringing up my closet so much, but am I the only one that was like terrified of everything in my basement? I still am. I have to check every single corner of my basement before I go to bed every single night. I don't know if that's normal. So what makes Wreck a masterclass in horror? It doesn't rely on overused tropes or crazy gore. Instead, it digs deep into primal fears, being trapped, the darkness concealing unspeakable horrors, and the unsettling notion that reality can warp into a nightmare without warning. It's a film that doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to unsettle you, to make you question the safety of the everyday world around you. Therefore, if you're craving a good horror experience that lingers long after the credits, Wreck is your ticket. Just be prepared for a few sleepless nights and a phobia of apartment buildings. But hold on to your popcorn, because just when you thought it was safe to turn off the night vision, it's time to step into a place where the line between a staged scare and a real terror is not just blurred, it's practically non-existent.
What's up, guys? Oh, nice clowns.
Enter House LLC, a film that doesn't just unsettle you, it makes you question the very nature of reality. If Wreck had you rethinking apartment living, this one will have you side-eyeing every haunted house attraction you've ever visited. Quick note, whenever someone asks me for a recommendation for a horror film, this is my go-to recommendation. This is one of the best found footage movies out there. It's so well done. Just, if you haven't seen it, you gotta go watch it. Honestly, Hell House is one of the best found footage horror movies out there. It's so damn effective at what it does. It's hard to compare it to anything else, except maybe the original Blair Witch Project. Remember how that film had everyone freaking out, wondering if the footage was real? This movie taps into that same vein of authentic terror. In fact, I believe that if this movie came out at the same time as Blair Witch, this would have been bigger, and people would have believed this one more. What makes Hell House so terrifying is its masterful blurring of reality and fiction. The film is presented as a documentary, investigating a tragedy that occurred at a haunted house attraction. It combines interviews, news footage, and the crew's own recordings to create a narrative that feels disturbingly real. It's the kind of movie that after watching, you might just find yourself Googling to see if it actually happened. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But the fact that you even considered doing that speaks volumes. Why does this work? Because it taps into our instincts to believe in the authenticity of found footage. We've been taught to trust documentaries, but this film doesn't just show you a story. It immerses you in a world where the horrific events could very well be part of our reality. By constructing such a believable backstory and presenting the footage as recovered evidence, it engages that part of our brain that craves the truth, even in fiction. It's like a psychological sleight of hand magic trick, and Hell House is a master magician. Except I don't know if you're gonna want to get cut in half at this magic show, because you'll probably die and be transported to like Satan's house. Maybe he's got cookies, I don't know. Now let's talk about the scares. The deliciously terrifying moments that crawl under your skin and refuse to leave. Hell House doesn't rely on cheap jump scares. Instead, it plays on universal fears. The unknown lurking in the shadows, the eerie stillness of mannequins and clowns, and the unsettling possibility that something familiar is not what it seems. Clowns are creepy enough on their own. We can thank it for that, but stationary clown figures that might not be so stationary, that's a whole new level of nope, fuck that, I'm out of here. There's literally a scene where a character walks past a clown mannequin only to find it facing a different direction moments later. No music, no sudden moments, Just a subtle change that sends a chill down your spine. Why is this effective? Because it exploits the fear that something has happened just beyond our perception. It's the classic corner of the eye phenomena. Did that shadow just move, or am I imagining things? This film is literally gaslighting you. It's like my abusive ex. Just kidding, I don't have an abusive ex. That's a joke. I think. These moments force you to pay attention, to scrutinize every frame for something amiss. It's interactive horror. You become an active participant in your own disturbing reality. What truly sets Hell House apart is how it uses the found footage format to immerse you completely into its world. The handheld cameras, the raw audio, the unpolished interactions between characters, it all feels unscripted and candid. This authenticity makes the descent into horror all the more impactful. You're not just watching characters on a screen, you're experiencing their journey alongside them. The film cleverly uses the setup of a haunted house attraction to blur the lines between staged scares and real ones. As the crew decorates the hotel, strange things begin to happen. Props aren't where they left them. Eerie noises echo through the halls, and that damn clown mannequin keeps showing up in the wrong places. Oh my god, what is it about clowns? Why are they so scary? Because the characters are building a place meant to scare other people, they initially dismiss these occurrences as pranks or their own imaginations. This denial adds to the tension. We, the audience, know something is wrong, but they haven't fully realized it yet. Why does this draw us in? Because it mirrors how we might react in the same situation. We'd rationalize, brush off the uncanny, cling to normalcy. It's a slow burn that builds an atmosphere of dread without tipping its hand too early. After watching Hell House, I couldn't help but rethink all of my decisions to ever go to a haunted house. I mean, paying money to walk through dimly lit corridors filled with jump scares suddenly seemed like I was risking my life. And those clown mannequins, let's just say I've developed a newfound appreciation for minimalism in my home decor. No statues, no dolls, nothing that could possibly move on its own when I'm not looking. I don't want to deal with that. It's not allowed in my house. Seriously though, this film taps into the primal fear of inanimate coming to life. It's like Toy Story gone wrong. Imagine your toys not just moving around, but plotting something far more crazy, like tying you up to your bed. Never mind. So what really makes Hell House a standout in the found footage genre? It's the perfect storm of believable storytelling, psychological horror, and the exploitation of universal fears. It doesn't just show you scary things, it makes you question the reality of what's happening. It invites you to look closer, to engage with the terror on a personal level. Therefore, the film succeeds not just in scaring you, but in lingering with you. It's the shadow in the corner of your eye, the creak in the floorboards at night, the lingering doubt that maybe, just maybe, the horror isn't confined to the screen. But if you thought haunted houses and creepy clowns were enough to keep you up at night, wait until we dive into our next movie. Because just when you thought it was safe to come back above ground after Hell House, we gotta go back in and take a deep breath and dive into the depths, literally. Allow me to introduce you to The Tunnel. Amazing name, I know. This is a film that redefines underground horror. Literally. It's a movie that doesn't just play on your fears, it tunnels into them. Pun absolutely intended. I watched The Tunnel recently, even though it's been out for over a decade, and let me tell you, it left an impression deeper than the tunnels itself. Sorry, I'll stop making tunnel puns, I promise. First off, let's talk claustrophobia. Being underground is unnerving on its own. No fresh air, the weight of the earth above you, the sense that the walls are closing in. But the tunnel doesn't just stop there. It plunges you into a maze of abandoned train tunnels beneath Sydney, Australia, where the unknown isn't just a possibility, it's a constant presence. Why is this so effective? Because it taps into that primal fear of being trapped with no escape route. Every step deeper into the tunnel feels like a step further away from safety. I remember going on an underground cave tour in Mexico earlier this year. At one point, our tour guide had us turn off our headlamps to experience true darkness. Imagine holding your hand an inch from your face and seeing absolute nothing but black. Complete dark blackness. Standing there, submerged in darkness, I felt a sliver of the anxiety that the tunnel captures so perfectly. It's not just the fear of tight spaces, it's the fear of the unknown that could be lurking just beyond your perception, literally 3 inches in front of your face. Light is our primary tool for navigating the world. It gives us control, reveals dangers, and offers comfort. But what happens when that light fades? The tunnel expertly plays on the fear of losing this vital sense. The characters are armed with a limited amount of light sources, flashlights, camera lights, flares, and as they venture deeper, the looming question isn't just what might we find, but what if our lights go out? There's a moment when their equipment starts failing and the darkness becomes almost a character itself, oppressive, all-consuming. But why does this resonate with us? Because darkness strips away our ability to anticipate and react. It heightens every other sense, amplifies every sound, and allows our imaginations to conjure up horrors far worse than any on-screen monster. Remember that cave in Mexico I talked about? Standing in utter darkness, I became acutely aware of every drip of water, every rustle. My mind played tricks on me, magnifying the smallest sounds into potential threats. Therefore, when the characters in the tunnel start losing their light, we're right there with them. Our own anxieties are mirroring theirs. Now let's address the film's pacing. Unlike many horror movies that rely on frequent jump scares, the tunnel opts for sustained tension. The beauty here is in the anticipation. You don't know when or if something will happen. Your muscles tense, your grip tightens on the armrest, and your heartbeat syncs with the character's mounting fear. When scares do occur, they're incredibly effective because the film has earned them. It's like winding a jack-in-the-box for minutes on end, and when the figure finally pops out, it's genuinely startling. Why does this approach work? Because it respects the audience's intelligence. It doesn't bombard you with cheap thrills, but it builds a credible atmosphere of dread. Therefore, when the tension finally breaks, even if it's just a minor scare, it hits you like a freight train. Watching the tunnel made me rethink my stance on spelunking. As much as I enjoyed that cave tour in Mexico, I now have a strict policy. If there's any chance my light might fail and I can be left in the dark with who knows what, count me out, especially in an underground cave, because you're not gonna get out. It's so dark. There is no way you would escape that. And don't be one of those people that's like, nah, I'd live. Do not comment, nah, I'd be okay. If you haven't been in a cave, you don't understand. Let's not forget about the sound design in this movie. Every drip of water, every distant echo becomes a potential threat. It's like when you're home alone and the house decides to make all sorts of noises it never does when other people are around. Hello? Who's there? Sorry, I thought I heard somebody downstairs. Except in the tunnel, those noises might actually be something or someone lurking in the shadows. So what makes the tunnel stand out in the realm of found footage horror? It's the masterful use of setting and atmosphere to induce fear. It doesn't need over-the-top monsters or excessive gore. The environment itself becomes the antagonist. It taps into universal fears, darkness, isolation, the unknown. It leverages these elements to create a tension that's unreal. Therefore, the film lingers with you. After the credits roll, you might find yourself hesitating before turning off the lights or venturing into your basement to grab another cookie out of the deep freeze. The tunnel proves that sometimes what you don't see is far scarier than what you do. What if I told you there are movies out there that don't just make you jump, they make your skin crawl in ways you didn't think possible? Well, today I'm sharing 3 body horror hidden gems that'll make you question every single itch and weird tingle you get on your skin. And trust me, these aren't your mainstream scary horror movies. These are underrated, disturbing body horror films. Speaking of disturbing, if you don't like this video and hit that subscribe button, I might just become your new sleep paralysis demon. Kidding. Or am I? No, for real, it takes you 5 seconds to do this, and you have no idea how helpful it is for me. But now, it's time to get uncomfortable. Have you ever wondered what color insanity might be? No, neither did I until I watched Color Out of Space. I'll confess, I dodged this movie for the longest time. Maybe it was the trippy poster art that looked like a unicorn threw up on it, or perhaps the idea of Nicolas Cage battling aliens sounded, well, I wasn't really sold. But here's the thing, Color Out of Space isn't just another sci-fi horror flick. It's a cosmic nightmare that gets under your skin and makes you question the very fabric of reality. So, what's so terrifying about a color, you ask? Imagine an alien color that doesn't fit anywhere on the known spectrum. A color beyond human comprehension that warps everything it touches. This isn't your regular variety alien invasion. Plants twist into grotesque shapes, animals fuse into abominations, and people, well, they start losing more than just their minds. The Gardner family, isolated on their quaint farm, becomes ground zero for this inexplainable phenomena. And let me tell you, isolation never looked so claustrophobic. Have you ever had that feeling when you're so far off the grid that even your GPS gives up? Now toss in an existential threat that defies physics and you've got yourself quite a party. Nicolas Cage delivers a performance that's equally parts unsettling and captivating. Sure, he's known for going a bit over the top, but here his descent into madness feels very authentic. But it's not just about one man's unraveling sanity. The real horror lies in the loss of control and identity. When reality itself starts to warp, where do you anchor yourself? The film taps into that primal fear of the unknown, the kind that makes you second guess every shadow and flicker of light. And let's talk about the visuals. The use of color isn't just a gimmick, it's a character unto itself. Vivid, mesmerizing, and utterly menacing. Yes, you're going to be scared of a color after watching this. It's like watching a beautiful painting slowly melt into chaos. You're drawn in even as you want to look away. But what's a cosmic horror without a dash of existential dread? The film subtly asks if something truly incomprehensible decided to upend our little corner of the universe, could we even comprehend it, let alone stop it? And that's where the color out of space shines, or rather, glows ominously. It doesn't rely on cheap jump scares. Instead, it builds a lingering sense of doom that's hard to shake off. By the end, you're left with more questions than answers, and an uneasy feeling that maybe, just maybe, we aren't as in control as we'd like to think. So if you're up for a horror movie that doesn't just make you jump, but makes you think, give Color Out of Space a watch. Just be prepared to start seeing magenta as a whole new scary color. Just for the record, after watching this movie, I decided to paint my walls. Can't be too careful. Trust me, this film is a trip worth taking. Just don't blame me if you start side-eyeing your surroundings afterwards. The body horror it shows is unbelievably good. Next up is a film that slipped under many radars, but left an undeniable mark on my psyche, The Void. I stumbled upon this gem about 3 years ago, not knowing what to expect. But here's the thing, I've always been a fan of John Carpenter's The Thing. You know, that classic that sets the bar for practical effects and body horror? Well, The Void doesn't just nod to it, it embraces its legacy while carving out its own disturbing niche. But don't get me wrong, nothing can truly compare to The Thing. Not even its own sequel could capture that same magic. The Void, however, comes astonishingly close, and that's saying something. So I walked in this movie clueless about its body horror elements, expecting the usual thriller movie. Therefore, when the first grotesque transformation unfolded on screen, I was shocked and hooked. What sets The Void apart isn't just its visceral horror, it's the beating heart beneath all of the gore and body horror. The characters aren't just fodder for the monstrosities, they have depth, relationships, and emotional stakes that make their fates all the more impactful. At the center of it all is a small town cop, Daniel. He's grappling with personal issues, particularly with his wife, Allison, who happens to be a nurse at the local hospital. Their relationship is strained, filled with unspoken regrets and lingering feelings. But before they can even begin to mend their fractured bond, they're thrust into a nightmare that defies comprehension. Therefore, their personal struggles become intertwined with a fight for survival against forces that are anything but human. Imagine being trapped in a nearly abandoned hospital, surrounded by silent cultists in white robes. Sounds bad enough, right? But it gets worse. Very, very much worse. Kinda makes your last hospital visit seem like a spa day. Just kidding, I live in Canada. The hospitals are hell here. The true horror unfolds when the patients and staff begin to transform. Grotesque mutations that are as shocking as they are disturbing. We're talking tentacles where there shouldn't be tentacles, bodies contorting in impossible ways. Now, I've never been a fan of calamari, but after this movie, seafood is definitely off the menu. But it's not just shock for shock's sake. The practical effects are a labor of love, nodding back to a time when CGI wasn't the go-to. These tangible, visceral visuals make the horror feel real, almost a little too real. Therefore, every creature, every unsettling transformation isn't just a special effect, it's a masterpiece of horror craftsmanship. But what really gets under your skin is the emotional core. Daniel's desperation to save Allison adds a layer of heart. Can you imagine the person you love transforming into something unrecognizable, yet still being there in some twisted form? It's a fate worse than death, worse than loss. They're there, but they aren't. They can scream, but they have no mouth. It's a visceral exploration of grief, love, and the fear of losing oneself and others to forces beyond control. Therefore, the horror isn't just external, it's profoundly personal. And let's talk about the Lovecraftian elements. The Void doesn't just dip its toes into cosmic horror, it dives headfirst into the abyss. The idea of tampering with life and death, of opening doors to dimensions we were never meant to access, adds layers of existential dread. But as humans, we're curious creatures. That's why you clicked on this video. We push boundaries, and sometimes, therefore, we face the consequences of that curiosity. In the movie, Dr. Powell embodies this, a man so consumed by grief that he seeks forbidden knowledge to overcome it, regardless of its cost. His actions set off a chain of events that trap our characters in a siege, both physical and mental. The hospital becomes a claustrophobic labyrinth where every corridor could lead to salvation or a fresh horror. But here's the kicker, the film doesn't spoon-feed you explanations. It trusts you to piece together the cosmic puzzle, making the experience all the more immersive. Therefore, you're left with lingering questions and a sense of unease that sticks with you long after the credits roll. The Void is an example of what body horror can achieve when it balances visceral shocks with emotional depth. It's not just about the monsters lurking in the shadows, but the ones we carry within us, the grief, the regrets, the desperate choices. So if you're craving something that's almost like The Thing, but it's its own little thing, see what I did there? The Void is for you. But this next film is something else. Comedy and horror. A match made in, well, somewhere between heaven and a very dark, twisted version of hell. Too often, though, horror comedies miss the mark, going for cheap laughs and cheaper scares. But then there's Tusk. Yes, we're talking about Tusk. I'd heard whispers about this movie for years. A movie where a guy gets turned into a walrus. Sounds crazy, right? So I avoided it thinking it was just some gimmicky horror trying too hard to be funny. But here's the thing. Tusk isn't just a horror comedy. It's a dark, twisted exploration of humanity that uses its craziness to make you squirm in your seat. Therefore, I finally gave it a shot, and let me tell you, it left me equal parts amused and deeply unsettled. The premise is simple enough. A podcaster named Wallace, note how his name sounds very similar to a certain word, travels to Canada in search of bizarre stories. He's arrogant, self-absorbed, and frankly, not the most likable guy. But when he meets the strange Howard Howe, things take a sharp turn. Now, I won't spoil the details. It's the name of the movie, obviously. But let's just say Wallace ends up in a situation that blurs the lines between man and beast, quite literally. The transformation is gross, horrifying, and yet you cannot look away. It's body horror at its finest, using practical effects that make your skin crawl. But what's truly disturbing isn't just the physical change, it's the psychological torment that comes with it. Here's a guy who started off as a bit of a jerk, a man who's mocked others for entertainment, but as he loses his humanity piece by piece, you start to question your own reactions. Is it okay to laugh at someone's misfortune when someone so unlikable faces such a fate? Well, the movie plays with this moral question masterfully. But then as you witness his pain and his anguish, the laughter fades. You're left with an unsettling realization that no one deserves this level of suffering, no matter how flawed they are. It's a dark mirror held up to our own judgments and the ease with which we can dehumanize others. Howard Howe, the antagonist, isn't just a madman for the sake of horror. His obsession runs deep, fueled by grief and a twisted sense of purpose. His actions force us to confront the dangers of unchecked obsession and how trauma can warp one's reality. Therefore, Tusk becomes more than a horror movie. It's a commentary on identity, humanity, and the fine line between man and monster. And let's not forget the dark humor threaded throughout. Kevin Smith balances the gross with the absurd, making you chuckle one moment and cringe in fear the next. But the laughs aren't there to cheapen the scares. They're there to amplify it. By disarming us with humor, the film makes the shocking moments hit even harder. Remember how I said I wasn't big on horror comedies that try too hard? Well, Tusk taught me that when done right, humor can be the perfect vessel for horror. It's the kind of movie that makes you question if you're allowed to laugh, then keeps you awake at night pondering what you've just witnessed. Moreover, the practical effects are nothing short of haunting. Wallace's transformation doesn't result in a cute anthropomorphic walrus. Oh no, it's a visceral, unsettling creature that embodies his loss of humanity. It doesn't even look like a walrus, yet it still does. That's how terrifying it is. The details of the walrus make it all the more real, grounding the absurdity in tangible horror. So why does Tusk deserve a spot on this list? Because it challenges us. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about empathy, justice, and what it truly means to be human. It's not just about the scares, it's about the lingering unease that follows. By the time the credits roll, you're left grappling with mixed emotions. Was it okay to laugh? Should you feel guilty for feeling relief or satisfaction? But that's the beauty of Tusk. It doesn't offer easy answers. It stays with you, gnawing at the edges of your consciousness. Plus, you're never gonna look at a walrus the same way again. Trust me on that. You're not gonna be going to the zoo after this. So if you're up for a body horror experience that's just as thought-provoking as it is unsettling, give Tusk a watch. Just be prepared for some very weird dreams afterwards. I don't know why, but I started dreaming of walruses in like a weird way, like how the creepy guy in the movie did. I didn't really have to share that, but I felt like I did. Have you ever sat through a disturbing, gory horror movie so boring you started to think a spilled ketchup bottle was more scary? Most torture corn movies out there. Unlike that, Terrifier 3 is coming out this month, and while I think the Terrifier movies are great fun, Terrifier 3 got me thinking of blunt, cruel horror movies that disturb you weeks after watching them. Well, today I'm sharing 3 disturbing hidden horror gems that'll make your soul feel broken after watching them. I promise you by the end of this video, you will see that that is not me over-exaggerating or a joke. You might be scratching your head thinking, wait, a comedy in a video about disturbing horror movies? What is up with that? Well, let me introduce you to Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead. Trust me, this isn't your typical chuckle-worthy flick. Despite being incredibly funny and goofy, the sheer amount of gore in this movie is downright disturbing. That's the only way I can put this. Picture this, you're laughing one moment at the craziness on screen, and the next, you're feeling a bit queasy. The practical effects are so over the top, they make even the most seasoned horror fans like me squirm. It's this roller coaster of emotions that makes Dead Alive a must watch. And you may be wondering, why are we starting with this film? Well, all 3 movies we're discussing today will disturb you in different ways while also scarring you. This one is the lighter of the trio, but don't let that fool you. It will still make your skin crawl. And guess who directed this crazy ride? None other than Peter Jackson, the guy who made The Lord of the Rings. Surprised? Yeah, me too. The reason you might not know about this is because he doesn't like to talk about it. And why is that? Well, you'll just have to watch it and find out. Let's just say it is very, very different than a journey of the hobbits and a battle for Mordor. But it makes it hard to put into words how great the effects in this movie are and just how gross it makes you feel. The practical effects are a masterclass in making audiences simultaneously marvel and recoil. We're talking about some of the bloodiest scenes in horror cinema history. But here's the twist. While most horror movies rely on CGI or subtle scares, Dead Alive goes all in with practical gore. Therefore, it creates an experience that's both viscerally disturbing and oddly entertaining. You see stuff like this. And then you get lines like this.
I kick ass for the Lord.
And here's a warning. Do not eat while watching this movie. Seriously, this is not a movie you want to bring popcorn to. The film perfectly blends horror with absurdist humor. It's what's known as splatstick, a combination of slapstick comedy and splatter horror. Outrageous scenarios like a zombie baby causing chaos in a park or a priest proclaiming,
I kick ass for the Lord.
Yeah, it creates a surreal and darkly comedic tone, but beneath all of the gore and laughs, there's some clever commentary. The movie takes jabs at middle-class society, overbearing mothers, and even organized religion. It's a crazy take on domestic life and societal expectations. Yes, this crazy movie has a meaning to it. I don't know how. It really makes you think that awkward family dinner at Thanksgiving seems pretty tame now, doesn't it? And what sets Dead Alive apart is how it pushes the boundaries of good taste in the best way possible. The sheer volume of the amount of gore effects they had to invent for this movie are both shocking and impressive, especially given the film's very low budget. It just kind of shows the scale of Peter Jackson's creativity. At the heart of all of this craziness is a guy named Lionel, a meat guy with a very demanding mother. His journey from mama's boy to zombie slaying hero is oddly satisfying too. You find yourself rooting for him despite, or maybe because of, the insanity unfolding around him. Now about that gore. Remember when I said it's over the top? Well, at the very end, there's a scene involving a lawnmower that used over 300 liters of fake blood. Yes, you heard that right, 300 liters. I think there's only one movie out there that tops this, and that is Evil Dead, and that's only because they use blood as rain. I think this is number one other than that. That's literally enough fake blood to fill a kiddie pool. Not that you'd want to swim in that. The creativity in the kill scenes is also unmatched. Zombies being liquefied in a blender, limbs flying in every direction. It's a carnival of carnage, but it's so exaggerated that it circles back to being comedic. But why is this movie so important? Because Dead Alive doesn't just rely on shock value. It uses its excess to comment on societal norms and human behavior. It's satire wrapped up in human organs. This movie also had a very large cultural impact. It helped launch Peter Jackson's career, showcasing his ability to balance multiple tones and genres. And it's developed a strong cult following and influenced many filmmakers in the horror comedy genre. And if you've ever wondered where some of your favorite horror directors get their inspiration, this might be the movie. This might be the birth of all horror comedies. Now let's circle back to why this film is disturbing. It's not just the gore, it's the way it makes you confront this grossness while laughing. It challenges your reactions and expectations. One minute you're laughing, the next you're uncomfortable, and that emotional whiplash is intentional. It's like the movie is playing ping pong with your feelings, just like my ex. And by the time the credits are rolling, you're left with a mix of awe and disbelief. It's a film that sticks with you for better or for worse. So if you're up for a movie that redefines the boundaries of horror and comedy, Dead Alive is your ticket. It's wild, it's disturbing, and it's a very funny, gory ride that you won't forget anytime soon. All right, brace yourselves. We're shifting gears dramatically. And ethically, I have to say this right now. These next two movies are soul-crushing, but I think they both are amazing movies with a deep message that they are trying to convey. But if that isn't chill with you, leave right now, I am warning you. Let's talk about a film that's often whispered about. A movie that many people tell you not to watch. Why? Because Martyrs isn't just heavy, it's an emotional avalanche. You might be wondering, why is he including a film that's so intense it comes with its own caution sign? Well, sometimes movies aren't just about entertainment. They're about confronting uncomfortable truths. Martyrs does exactly that, in a way that's both disturbing and profoundly impactful. First things first, a sincere warning. This film is not for the faint of heart. Yes, this is a second warning. It's a journey into the depths of human suffering portrayed with unflinching realism. But amidst the darkness, there's a message that's both important and thought-provoking. But unlike typical horror movies that stylize and glamorize violence, Martyrs presents brutality without any cinematic cushion. Therefore, it forces us, the audience, to face the raw, unsettling realities of trauma and its lingering effects. The violence here isn't dressed up with special effects or dramatic scores. It's stark, unembellished, and it hits you like a freight train. It shows how trauma doesn't just leave physical scars, but becomes an inescapable part of a person's existence. Many horror films ramp up the gore for shock value, making it almost entertaining. Martyrs takes a different path. It removes any notion of enjoyment from its portrayal of suffering. There is no fun in watching this movie, and that's precisely its point. So what is the heart of this disturbing, unsettling experience? At its core, Martyrs delves deep into the themes of classism, the divides between the middle class, the poor, and the elite. It's a brutal, real commentary on how ordinary people often endure hardship so that a select few can thrive. Feeling cheery and happy yet? Don't worry, it gets even more uplifting. The film illustrates this through a narrative that's both literal and metaphorical. The characters endure unimaginable pain, symbolizing how societal structures can exploit and dehumanize those deemed less valuable. It's a harsh reminder of the lengths to which some people will go in the pursuit of power, knowledge, or fulfillment, often at the expense of others' humanity. But despite its controversial content, the film is a work of art. Therefore, it's praised not just for its boldness, but also for its direction, cinematography, and outstanding acting. The actors deliver performances that are raw and heart-wrenching. They're so convincing that you almost forget you're watching a film. It's this level of authenticity that elevates Martyrs beyond typical horror scares. Unlike many films that delve into extreme violence, this one doesn't exploit or fetishize it. Every act of brutality serves a purpose, contributing to the film's overarching message and forcing viewers to confront the unsettling realities it presents. If you're a bit of a movie buff, this approach is a hallmark of French cinema, particularly the new French extremity movement. Martyrs is often interpreted as a commentary on France's history of colonialism and the atrocities committed during the Algerian War. Yes, leave it to the French to mix existential dread with historical critique. But all jokes aside, the film also delves into systematic violence against women and broader societal issues. It challenges us to think about the moral implications of inflicting pain for a supposed greater good. Personally, Martyrs has lingered in my mind ever since I watched it. And to be honest, I've only watched it once. It's not a film you casually revisit, but the impact it leaves is undeniable. Now, it's even tough to recommend this movie. If you decide to watch it, be prepared. It may leave you feeling shaken or even broken, but sometimes art is meant to challenge us, to push us out of our comfort zones and make us reflect on aspects of humanity we'd rather ignore. And a crucial, very important note, if you do decide to watch Martyrs, make sure it's the original French version. The remake is just not good. It doesn't capture any of the messages that the original was trying to tell. And believe it or not, we're not done diving into the depths of disturbing films. While Martyrs might seem very far away from us, as this would never happen in the real world, up next is a movie that brings the horror uncomfortably close to home, because sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that actually exist. Shifting gears once again, we've talked about the craziness of Dead Alive to the disturbingness of Martyrs. Now we're entering a realm that's slightly less disturbing, but very much closer to every single person watching. Let's talk about Eden Lake.
No one goes there. You get in now.
Please let me go. I won't say anything. Please let me go.
Have you ever felt uncomfortable when a group of teenagers are being too loud on the street and you're trying to walk by minding your own business? Well, after watching Eden Lake, you might find yourself crossing the road or sprinting in the opposite direction. Trust me, this movie will make you scared of teenagers. Who knew that a 14-year-old with a bit of acne could be more terrifying than any masked slasher? But as this movie starts as a peaceful romantic getaway, it quickly turns into a relentless nightmare. Therefore, we're thrust into a very scary story that exposes the darkest corners of human nature. Eden Lake shocks us to the core by showcasing what unchecked violence and raw human instincts can do when there's nothing around to stop them. It's a dark reminder of just how thin society is and how easily all of those rules we've made can be broken. The story follows Jenny and Steve, a couple looking to escape the hustle and bustle by spending a weekend at a secluded lake. Sounds peaceful, right? But their peaceful vacation quickly turns sour when they cross paths with a group of local teenagers who seem intent on making their lives miserable. Doesn't seem too scary, right? At first, it's just minor annoyances, blasting loud music, a bit of trash talk, but things spiral rapidly. And before you know it, Jenny and Steve are fighting for their lives. You can't help but feel the tension as the couple tries to de-escalate the situation. They're torn between not wanting to overreact to just kids and the gnawing fear that something is very, very wrong. This film makes me never want to go on a vacation where teenagers are going to be around me. The movie portrays the clash between middle-class urbanites and the working-class rural youth. It's a really raw, real examination of class conflict, showing how misunderstandings and prejudices can ignite into violence. But here's where Eden Lake stands out. Unlike typical horror movies with supernatural villains or serial killers, the antagonists here are painfully real and believable. You've probably met one before. Therefore, the horror feels uncomfortably close to reality, making it all the more disturbing. Eden Lake doesn't rely on jump scares or gore for shock value. Instead, it builds a creeping dread through realistic scenarios and authentic character interactions. The teenagers aren't portrayed as one-dimensional monsters. They're products of their environment, carrying anger and resentment that manifests in terrifying ways. And the acting is top-notch. Kelly Reilly and Michael Fassbender deliver performances that pull you into their desperation and fear. And the young actors portraying the teenagers are equally convincing, making the tension that much more scary. I literally think they just went to a local high school, picked 6 assholes and said, hey, we're gonna make a movie. It's that bad. They're that bad, the acting is that good. But as the couple tries to escape without harming the kids, because after all, they're just teenagers, their options are narrow. Therefore, they're forced into moral dilemmas that question their values and instincts. Suddenly, your annoying neighborhood kid doesn't seem so bad, right? And nature itself becomes a character in the film. The stunning lake and surrounding woods are both beautiful and menacing, amplifying the isolation and vulnerability of the protagonists. It's a stark contrast that adds to the unsettling atmosphere. Now let's address expectations. When you start watching, you might think, oh, another thriller where the couple outsmarts the bad guy and drives off into the sunset. But no, Eden Lake flips that script entirely. Just when you think you've got it figured out, the film delivers an ending that's both shocking and thought-provoking. It's an unflinching look at the cycle of violence and how it fuels itself. The movie doesn't just scar you, it unsettles you. It forces you to confront uncomfortable truths about society, class divisions, and the capacity for cruelty in normal, ordinary people. It's not just about survival, it's about the loss of innocence and the moral compromises made under extreme stress. It's a scary reminder that sometimes the real monsters are the ones we least expect, the ones that already exist within society and everyday interactions. At least with zombies, you know what they're after. Brains. With teenagers, you never know. I was talking with a friend the other day about which monster horror movies were the scariest ones out there. They said It Too. I looked at them and I was like, dude, what? I realized that other than the classics, this person has not seen good, scary monster movies. Naturally, I love sharing my opinions with people that don't ask, so I suggested they watch this cool French movie called Infested, or as I like to call it, the reason I now check under my bed for spiders every night. You know how most spider movies crank up the size of the arachnids to the point where they're basically small elephants with extra legs? Well, Infested doesn't play that game, but that's exactly what makes it so terrifying. The spiders start off small, like actually spider-sized small. Therefore, it taps into that everyday fear we have when we see something scuttle across the floor out of the corner of our eye. And these aren't cartoonish CGI creations that you can easily dismiss as fake. Nope, these spiders move and behave in ways that are unnervingly realistic. The film combines real spiders with just enough CGI to enhance the creep factor without making it look fake. It's like the director peeked into our collective nightmares and said, yeah, let's do that one. Now you might think, okay, spiders are creepy, but how much suspense can they really build? Well, Infested answers that with a resounding, hold my spider. The movie is set in a run-down Parisian housing project, a place that already feels a little bit claustrophobic. But as the spider population starts to multiply, the residents find themselves increasingly trapped. Therefore, literally every hallway becomes a gauntlet. Every room becomes a potential death trap. Just like my relationship with my ex. The director Sebastian Vanique, I don't know if I butchered that, masterfully uses tight spaces and dim lighting to crank up the tension. There's a scene where a character has to navigate a very dark hallway with only a flashlight, knowing that any moment they could walk face first into a web, or worse. It's the kind of suspense that has you clutching your seat muttering, don't go in there for the love of God. But here's where Infested spins a web deeper than just creature horror. Beneath the layers of all the creepy crawlies lies a very smart societal commentary. The film doesn't shy away from highlighting the struggles of living in an impoverished urban area. But this isn't a lecture, it's actually an integral part of the story. That is the best way to tell stories about tough subjects, because when you make it a part of the story, it makes it that much more real. Therefore, the residents aren't just fighting spiders, they're battling neglect, poverty, in a system that doesn't seem to care whether they live or become spider chow. In all the monster movies you've seen, the police are always there to help out. But what if we take a real world situation and see how the police are gonna act? That's exactly what Infested does, and that's what makes the story that much more potent. And this dual struggle adds a sort of emotional weight to the film. You're not just invested in whether they can squash a few spiders, you're rooting for them to overcome the larger forces at play. It's horror that makes you think about it after you're done. And I'll have to admit, after watching Infested, every little tickle on my skin made me jump. At one point, a piece of lint brushed my arm and I nearly performed an exorcism on myself. If you're even slightly arachnophobic, this movie will have you questioning every single sensation on your skin. But that's the brilliance of it. It doesn't just scare you while you're watching, it sticks with you long after, lurking in the shadows of your mind, like, well, a spider in the corner of your ceiling. On the bright side, I've never been more motivated to clean my house. If all this has you checking your peripheral vision for creeping shadows, hit the like button and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around. Unlike the spiders, I promise I won't overstay my welcome. Unfortunately, the friend I was recommending Infested to said they were too scared of spiders to watch it, which sucks because it's a great movie, but it got me thinking of an even more terrifying movie that's been out for over 30 years and most people have never even seen it. It's called The Blob, or as I like to call it, the reason I now have a phobia of Jello. Okay, let's be real here. When you hear The Blob, you might think of some goofy, slow-moving jelly monster that's about as threatening as a spilled smoothie. But don't let that name fool you. Once you watch the 1988 remake, you'll realize this blob is the stuff of nightmares. The deaths in this movie aren't your typical monster jumps out, victim screams, fade to black scenarios. Oh no, The Blob takes its time. Victims are shown being slowly suffocated and melted alive inside of this gelatinous horror. Imagine being enveloped by something that dissolves you from the outside in, all while you're fully conscious. Sounds like Thanksgiving every year. It's like quicksand meets an acid bath, and it's about as horrifying as it sounds. Now you might wonder how a movie from the 80s can deliver scares that hold up to today. But this is where The Blob shines, literally and figuratively. The practical effects are nothing short of astonishing. The Blob itself is a gruesome marvel of special effects artistry. The way it moves, oozes, and engulfs its surroundings feel disturbingly real. Victims aren't just pulled into a giant mass, they're graphically dissolved on screen. The attention to detail makes the Blob seem like a living, breathing entity, if you can call a giant mass of corrosive jelly breathing. But here's the kicker, the Blob doesn't play by the usual horror movie rules. You know how in most films there's that group of characters you're sure will make it to the end credits? The smart ones, the likable ones, the ones with that main character energy? Well, this movie tosses that rulebook right into its own Blob. From the get-go, the film establishes that anyone can be a victim. Characters you're led to believe are actually the protagonists meet gruesome ends within the first 15 minutes. It reminds me a bit of the shock we all felt while watching Game of Thrones when key characters were killed off in the first season. This unpredictability keeps you on edge because honestly, if they're not safe, who is? I remember watching this movie thinking, surely that guy's gonna find a way out. Spoiler alert, he didn't. He's dead. They're having a funeral next week. But that's what makes The Blob so damn effective. It cultivates a genuine fear because you can't rely on cliches to predict the outcome. On the upside though, this movie really boosts my ego because it means that even the smartest of us can die from goo. Adding another layer to the terror, The Blob expertly blends body horror with science fiction. It's not just a mindless monster. It's an unknown alien substance, possibly a result of scientific experimentation gone horribly wrong. But unlike other sci-fi horrors that get lost in nerd speak, this film keeps it grounded. Therefore, this threat feels both like it's from another world and like it came from the sewer. After watching The Blob, I considered swearing off anything gelatinous. Jelly, jam, even that wobbly cake in the movies that always looks so good. Can't take any chances, right? Well, my friend actually took a chance and watched this movie. Then they came to me 2 days later and said, I thought this was gonna be shit, but it was actually really scary. I have a date with my girlfriend tomorrow and she wants to watch a horror movie. What should I show her? And I said, I may be bad at dating, I may be unattractive, but god damn it, I know a good horror movie. And that's when I told them about the monster movie that made me scared of the dark. The Descent. The walls feel like they're closing in, and every turn could lead to a dead end. Or worse, a drop into oblivion. But claustrophobia isn't the only card The Descent has up its sleeve. The movie digs deep into psychological horror, exploring themes of guilt, betrayal, and survival. But it's not just about external threats, it's about the monsters lurking within us. Therefore, the added tension among the characters adds another layer of unease. These are friends with complex histories and unresolved social issues. As they go deeper into the cave, their relationships strain under the pressure, both literally and figuratively. You know that friend you're just kinda neutral with? Imagine being stuck in a cave under earth with them now. You're probably gonna crack. The isolation amplifies their emotions, making every interaction charged with subtext. It's like a high-stakes therapy session, but with more stalagmites and the occasional blood-curdling scream. Finally though, let's talk about the creatures, or rather, the lack of them. The Descent understands that what you don't see can be far more terrifying than what you do. You know that unspoken rule in horror films, the less you see the monster, the scarier it is? The Descent takes that rule and runs with it, straight into a pitch black cave. But here's the thing, even if the creatures never showed up, this movie would still have you gripping your seat. Therefore, the real terror lies in the environment itself. Imagine crawling through a labyrinth of underground tunnels so tight you can barely move. The film plays on our primal fear of the unknown and the unseen. Your mind starts to conjure up horrors far worse than anything a CGI artist could create. Because after all, the scariest monsters out there are the ones in our minds. The Descent understands that what you don't see can be far more terrifying than what you do. But when the monsters do make an appearance, they're shrouded in darkness, glimpsed only in fleeting moments. Therefore, your imagination fills in the gaps, often conjuring up something far scarier than any makeup department could design. The limited visibility not only heightens the suspense, but also mirrors the character's own inability to fully grasp the horrors surrounding them. It's one of the best lessons in less is more storytelling. But on the plus side, if you ever need an excuse to avoid your friend's next adventurous outing, just suggest a movie night with this gem. Trust me, they will not want to go outside after this one. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of The Descent is how it lingers in your mind. Unlike other horror films that fade from memory by morning, this one nestles into your subconscious. Therefore, don't be surprised if you find yourself double-checking dark corners or having vivid dreams about subterranean creatures. I just really love the idea of using darkness to so effectively tell a scary story. And that's why you've got to watch this other film called The Tunnel, which I talk all about later in the video on your screen right now.